Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is succumb. And first, I want to thank the viewer Zia for making this particular suggestion. So let's begin our discussion of this verb. The first way you might hear succumb used is to mean to give up or to give in. Now, with this definition, I realize there are some phrasal verbs there, and sometimes those are difficult to understand. So you might think of give up as like quit. Give in, you might think of somebody who asks you again and again and again to do something, and you finally go, oh, okay, fine. Right? So we can use this verb succumb to describe both of those actions. A second way you might hear succumb used is to mean to yield to superior strength or force. Now, with this particular definition, my mind immediately goes to books and movies, particularly stories where there's some sort of battle. And so one side is trying to control or dominate another person or group. And so you might hear this verb again used in sort of that context. So one side is much stronger than the other, and this kind of goes back to that first definition, they give up or they give in. A third way that you're going to hear the verb succumb used is to mean to die from the effect of some sort of disease or maybe some type of injury. Okay? You should know that succumb is a regular verb. And as I'm pronouncing this verb, you're probably noticing the B is silent. We're not making any B sound as we pronounce this verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I need to do is add ing to form succumbing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, succumb, ends with an M sound, and this is a voiced sound. So our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound. It should sound like this: succumbed, succumbed. Okay. Now, there aren't any additional phrasal verbs that we need to study to understand this verb, so we will focus on practicing our verb of the day in a couple different tenses. Today, we're going to talk about the imperative and the simple past. Let's start by talking about the imperative. This is rather unique in English. We are giving a command when we use the imperative. We can do this as we are speaking, we can give a command as we are writing, but in the imperative, there is no stated subject. So the subject is always implied. It's either you singular if I'm talking to one person, or it's you plural if I'm talking to two or more people. So what you'll notice with the imperative is that we can begin the sentence with just the base verb. Okay? So no subject, just the base verb. And sometimes it can seem rather direct or maybe forceful to tell someone to do a particular action. So you might hear or see the word please used at the beginning of a sentence or the end of an imperative sentence. You don't need it in both places. One is fine. But you're not going to see it in my example here. So for my affirmative example, I want you to picture kind of that action movie where we have two groups fighting each other, right? So one side or one person might say to another, succumb to your fate. We will rule this land for the rest of time, right? So they're probably trying to be very scary, very intimidating as they give this command, right? They're maybe telling this other group or other person, give up. Okay. Now, let's look at making a negative imperative sentence. To do this, we can start with do not and then the base verb. Again, there's no stated subject here. Okay? So, an example of a negative imperative might be don't succumb to temptation. Wait to try the desserts until after the party has started, right? So this might be that give in, right? Maybe you've had this experience before. I know I have, where I'm like, oh, this looks good. I wanna eat some, but right, I'm gonna try not to give in. I'm not going to eat until My guests have arrived and the party has officially started. Now let's talk about the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that are completed at some known point in the past. To make an affirmative sentence, we're going to start with our subject, then we're going to use the ed form of our verb. Let's take a look at another example sentence. Despite paramedics' best efforts, both passengers succumbed to their injuries after the crash. Unfortunately, I feel like I've read many sentences like this over many years, talking about car accidents, other horrible accidents, in and other events where someone has been injured. And in this case, this particular sentence is telling us that unfortunately, both people riding in the car here, the passengers, died because of the injuries they had during what I assume is a car accident. Now let's look at making a negative simple past tense sentence. To do this, we start with our subject, then we use did not, and then we use the base verb. So notice, we're not using the ed form of our verb in the negative. Here's another example sentence. They didn't succumb to the upset even though many others have during the World Cup. I read a sentence very similar to this. I'm following and watching as many games as I can while still working and teaching. And we know there have been some upsets where we think one team is going to dominate another, but in fact, the lower ranked or less regarded team has actually outperformed the other. So here we're talking about a group of players who did not maybe give up or get beaten. Lastly, let's look at making a yes or no question. To do this in the simple past tense, we start with did, then we have our subject, and then the base verb. So again, no ed form here in our yes or no question. Here's another example. Did she succumb to the cold weather? So again, in this sentence, unfortunately, our topic here is really about death. We're asking if someone died, maybe as a result of being outside in the cold for too long. Now we're going to take a moment to talk about a related word. I just have one today, and I want to note this is not a word that you're going to encounter very often. I spent a lot of time trying to find a really good example or multiple examples of this, and I struggled. So you may encounter the noun succumbence. So this would be the act or the process of succumbing. But again, I don't think it's going to be super likely, so I would not commit this word to memory. So I will give you one example, though, of this noun in a sentence. The second half of the movie explores their unwitting succumbance to their base desires. So this process of succumbing here would likely be talking about the process of giving in to kind of like their lowest desires, wishes. Some might think of this as kind of like our worst instincts, right? As human beings, what are some of the worst the worst things maybe we could do or say in a particular situation. Thanks again to the viewer Zia for making this suggestion, and I thank you all for watching this video. Have a great day.